I never thought I'd be the villain at my own sister's baby shower. Yet there I stood, champagne flute trembling in my hand, watching 30 pairs of mascara-rimmed eyes staring at me like I'd just announced I was planning to steal the baby. My sister Lana's face had transformed from glowing, expectant mother to something between horror and rage in the span of 10 seconds. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "How could you ruin today of all days?" But let me back up. This story doesn't start at the baby shower. It starts 3 years earlier, when I made a decision that would change everything. A decision nobody knew about until that fateful Sunday afternoon when it all came crashing down. My name is Adeline Whitaker. I'm 36. I live alone with my rescue cat Magnus in a downtown apartment I own outright, and according to my mother, I'm throwing my life away on meaningless career achievements while my biological clock ticks toward doomsday. Her words, not mine. My younger sister Lana, on the other hand, has been on a mission to become a mother since she married Todd 6 years ago. The mission hadn't been going well. 2 more negative tests this month. Lana's voice cracked over the phone. It was a Tuesday evening in November, and I was just settling in after a 14-hour workday. The doctor says we should consider IVF, but Todd's insurance won't cover it, and we can't afford it on our own. I shifted my phone to my other ear, watching Magnus stretch across my keyboard like he was auditioning for a feline yoga calendar. "That's rough, Lana. I'm sorry." "Mom says I should pray harder," she continued, her voice small. "Like God is withholding a baby because I don't have enough faith." I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly strained something. Our mother's advice typically ranged from unhelpful to actively harmful. "Mom needs to stop. This isn't about faith or deserving. It's medical." "I know, but..." She paused, and I could hear the tears coming. What if she's right? What if there's something wrong with me? "There's nothing wrong with you," I said firmly. "These things happen. It's biology, not a moral judgment." We talked for another hour, mostly about the same circles of fear and doubt she'd been traversing for months. By the time we hung up, I'd made up my mind. The next morning, I called a fertility clinic and made an appointment. Not for me, for my sister, though she wouldn't know it. I set up an anonymous donation arrangement to cover her treatments in full. The clinic was reluctant at first, but when I explained the situation and demonstrated I had the financial means, they agreed to contact Lana with news of an anonymous benefactor who wanted to help families struggling with fertility. 3 days. Later, Lana called me, practically hyperventilating with excitement. "You won't believe what happened," she squealed. "Some anonymous angel is paying for our IVF. All of it, Adeline. Every penny," I smiled, warming at the joy in her voice. "That's amazing, Lana. See? Good things happen." "It's a miracle," she whispered. "A true blessing." I let her believe that. It was easier than explaining that the miracle had come from her spinster sister's savings account. Money I'd been setting aside for years, working 60-hour weeks, taking on extra projects, investing carefully. Money that represented my choices, my priorities, my life. Why didn't I tell her? It's complicated. Partly, I didn't want her to feel indebted to me. Partly, I was afraid she would refuse out of pride. And partly, if I'm being completely honest, I knew that in our family, motherhood trumped all other achievements. If I admitted I was funding Lana's dream of motherhood, it would only underscore what everyone already believed, that my accomplishments were just consolation prizes for failing at what really mattered, having children. For the next year, I listened to Lana's updates, the hormone injections, the egg retrieval, the fertilization, the failed first transfer, the successful second transfer, the first ultrasound, the heartbeat. Each milestone a small miracle to her, each one funded by checks. I wrote in secret, and through it all, the family commentary about my own life grew increasingly pointed. "When are you going to settle down, Adeline?" Mom would ask at family dinners. "You're not getting any younger." Some women just aren't meant to be mothers, Aunt Patricia would say, with a sympathetic pat on my hand, as though my childlessness was a terminal diagnosis. Don't worry, my cousin Jennifer told me at Christmas. There are plenty of children who need adopting when you finally realize what you're missing. I smiled through it all, letting their comments roll off me like water off a duck's back. Or, at least, I pretended they did. In reality, each comment lodged somewhere deep inside me, forming a growing mass of resentment and hurt. But I kept writing the checks. Because despite everything, I loved my sister. I wanted her to be happy. Then came the day of Lana's 20-week anatomy scan. She asked me to come with her since Todd was away on a business trip. I sat beside her in the dimly lit ultrasound room, watching in wonder as the technician pointed out tiny hands, feet, a spine, a beating heart. "Do you want to know the sex?" the technician asked. Lana nodded eagerly, squeezing my hand. "It's a girl," the woman said with a smile. Lana burst into tears of joy, and I found myself crying too. It was real. My niece, a little girl who would know me as Aunt Adeline. "I can't wait to tell Mom," Lana said as we left the clinic. "She's going to be over the moon, her first granddaughter." We went to our parents' house directly from the appointment. Mom cried and hugged Lana, then turned to me with a pitying smile. "Don't worry, dear," she said, patting my cheek. "You'll experience this vicariously through your sister." I felt something crack inside me. I'm perfectly happy with my life choices. "Mom?" She laughed as though I'd made a joke. "Oh, honey, you don't have to put on a brave face. We all know you're just focused on your career because the right man hasn't come along yet. It's okay to admit you're a little jealous," she continued, oblivious to the hurt spreading across my face. "It's natural to feel that way when you see your younger sister achieving what every woman truly wants." Lana shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, that's not fair. Adeline has achieved amazing things." "Of course she has," Mom said dismissively. "But let's be honest. A successful career is cold comfort when you come home to an empty house every night." I looked at Lana, hoping for more support, but she just gave me an apologetic smile before turning the conversation back to the ultrasound pictures. I sat silently through dinner, nodding and smiling at appropriate intervals while something hard and cold formed in the pit of my stomach. That night, as I wrote another check for Lana's medical expenses, I wondered if I was a fool. Was I bankrolling my own humiliation? Paying for the very thing that my family used to diminish everything I had accomplished? But I sent the check anyway. Because this wasn't about me, or Mom, or our family's twisted value system. It was about Lana and the baby she desperately wanted, my niece. The months that followed brought more of the same. Lana's belly grew, and so did the family's commentary on my life. "Such a shame you never had children, Adeline." "I'm 36, not 86, Aunt Patricia. Don't you worry that you'll regret your choices when you're older? No more than you'll regret asking me that question, Uncle Robert. It must be so hard watching your sister live the life you missed out on." "Actually, Cousin Jennifer, it's hard listening to you talk." Through it all, I kept my secret. I attended Lana's doctor appointments when she asked. I helped her set up the nursery. I threw myself into being the supportive sister while privately funding the entire journey. Then came the baby shower invitation. My mother was hosting, of course. The theme was "A Star is Born," complete with gold and pink decorations and a request for guests to write stellar advice for the new parents. RSVP'd, yes, bought an expensive gift, and prepared myself for an afternoon of thinly veiled pity. What I wasn't prepared for was my sister's announcement at the start of the party. "Before we begin opening gifts," Lana said, standing in the center of my mother's festively decorated living room, "I want to thank someone very special. For the past year, Todd and I have been blessed by an anonymous donor who covered our fertility treatments. Without this guardian angel, our little star wouldn't be joining us in just a few weeks." A collective awe rose from the assembled guests. We still don't know who this person is, Lana continued, her hand resting on her rounded belly. But they've given us the greatest gift imaginable. So whoever you are, if you're somehow listening, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I felt a lump form in my throat. Part of me wanted to stand up right then and say, "It was me. I'm your anonymous donor." But before I could even consider it, my mother spoke up. "God works in mysterious ways," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. He knew how desperately Lana was meant to be a mother, so he sent help. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. "Not like some people who never even tried," came a voice from across the room. It was Aunt Patricia, who apparently couldn't go 15 minutes without making a passive-aggressive comment. Some women just don't have that maternal instinct. Several heads nodded in agreement, and I felt eyes shifting to me. Let's not turn this into another lecture for poor Adeline, my mother said in a stage whisper that was clearly meant to be heard by everyone. It's not her fault she prioritized other things. We can't all be blessed with maternal instincts. Lana looked uncomfortable. Mom, please. This isn't about Adeline. Of course not, dear. Today is all about you and that precious miracle. Mom patted Lana's belly. I just hope Adeline doesn't become the bitter spinster aunt. You know how childless women can get so resentful as they age. The room fell awkwardly silent. I sat frozen, champagne flute in hand, as heads turned toward me, with expressions ranging from pity to discomfort to barely concealed schadenfreude. And something inside me, something that had been bending and stretching for years, finally snapped. Actually, I said, rising to my feet, champagne sloshing over the rim of my glass, I have something to say. All eyes turned to me. Lana looked confused. My mother's expression hardened into the familiar disapproving frown I'd seen countless times. Adeline, she warned, this is not the time for one of your speeches about women's choices. You're right, I agreed, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. It's not. It's time for the truth. I turned to face Lana directly. I'm your anonymous donor, Lana. I've been paying for your fertility treatments from the beginning. The silence that followed was absolute. Lana's face went pale, her hand reflexively moving to protect her belly, as though my words might somehow harm the baby. That's not possible, she finally whispered. Call the clinic, I said. They can't reveal my identity, but they can confirm that your anonymous donor requested they contact you specifically. Mom was the first to recover. Why would you lie about something like this, Adeline? On today of all days? I'm not lying, I replied, looking her straight in the eyes. I've written checks totaling over $47,000 for Lana's treatments. I have the receipts. But why? Lana asked, her voice small. Why wouldn't you tell me? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Would you have accepted it if I had? Would you have let your bitter, childless spinster sister pay for your miracle baby? That's not fair, Lana said, tears welling in her eyes. I never called you that. You didn't have to, I replied. You let everyone else do it for you. You stood by while they reduced my entire existence to my empty uterus. Adeline, Mom gasped. Language. Oh, I'm sorry, I said, turning to her. Is uterus too crude for a baby shower? How about womb? Barren womb? Isn't that what Aunt Patricia called it last Thanksgiving? Aunt Patricia had the decency to look embarrassed. You're making a scene, Mom hissed. This is Lana's special day. Yes, it is, I agreed. And I've paid for it. I've paid for all of it. The treatments, the doctor's visits, even the medication. While you were all pitying me for my empty life, I was working 60-hour weeks to fund Lana's dream. And not once, not a single time, did any of you consider that maybe, just maybe, I'm actually happy with my choices. Lana was openly crying now, mascara streaking down her flushed cheeks. Why are you doing this now? Are you trying to hurt me? And there it was. the question that cut to the heart of everything. Was I trying to hurt her? Was this petty revenge for years of condescension and judgment? No, it was something else entirely. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Lana," I said, my voice softening. "I'm trying to be seen. For once in my life, I want our family to acknowledge that my worth isn't measured by whether or not I have children." The room remained silent. 30 guests, frozen in various poses of discomfort. "I love you," I continued, looking at my sister. "I love that baby. I have never resented your choices. I just wanted the same respect for mine." "So this was all just to prove a point?" Mom asked, her voice bitter. "No, Mom. The money was because I love Lana and wanted to help her. This," I gestured around the room, "this is because I'm tired of being the family cautionary tale." Placed my champagne flute on a nearby table and grabbed my purse. "Congratulations on your baby girl, Lana. I'm sure she'll be beautiful." I turned to the rest of the room. "Thank you all for making it abundantly clear where I stand in this family." And with that, I walked out, leaving behind a room full of shocked faces and whispered exclamations. As I got into my car, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. The secret I'd been carrying for so long was finally out in the open. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. I drove home in a daze, barely registering the familiar streets and stoplights. By the time I reached my apartment building, my hands had stopped shaking, but my mind was still racing. What had I done? Had I just destroyed my relationship with my sister? With my entire family? Magnus greeted me at the door with his usual imperious meow, completely unimpressed by my emotional crisis. Cats have a way of putting things in perspective. "Yes, you're starving, I know," I muttered, dropping my keys on the counter and reaching for his food. As I went through the motions of feeding him, my phone began to vibrate. Lana's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it until the call went to voicemail. Then Mom called. Then Lana again. Then my cousin Jennifer, which was surprising since we hadn't had a one-on-one conversation in years. I silenced my phone and poured myself a generous glass of wine. Outside my window, the city lights were beginning to twinkle in the early evening. Darkness. I stood there watching them, feeling strangely hollow, yet somehow lighter. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something told me I should answer. When I looked through the peephole, I was surprised to see my friend Avery standing there. I opened the door. "Avery, what are you doing here?" Avery Michaels had been my friend since college. She was one of the few people who understood my choices because she'd made similar ones herself. Successful career, no children by choice, unapologetic about either. "Serena called me," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Serena was Lana's best friend and had been at the baby shower. "Ah," I said, closing the door behind her. "I guess the news travels fast." "Apparently you dropped quite the bomb," Avery said, following me to the kitchen where she helped herself to a glass of wine. "Serena said it was like watching a Lifetime movie in real time." I couldn't help but smile a little at that. Did she mention the part where my mother called me a bitter spinster, or did she skip that detail? "She mentioned it," Avery confirmed, leaning against the counter. "She also mentioned that you've apparently been secretly funding your sister's fertility treatments, which, by the way, is information you might have shared with your best friend." I sighed. "I didn't tell anyone. That was kind of the point." "Until today," Avery pointed out. "What changed?" I took a long sip of wine, considering the question. I got tired of being the villain in their story. Avery nodded slowly. "I get that. But why today? Why at the baby shower?" It was a fair question, and one I wasn't sure I had a good answer for. Why had I chosen that moment, of all moments, to reveal my secret? "They were all there," I said finally. "Everyone who's ever judged me, pitied me, or reduced me to my reproductive choices." And they were celebrating Lana for fulfilling her destiny as a woman while simultaneously using her success to highlight my failure. I just couldn't take it anymore. Avery was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in her glass. I don't blame you for snapping, but you know this is going to be complicated to fix, right? Who says I want to fix it? I challenged, though even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Despite everything, these were still my family members. My sister, my niece, Avery, gave me a knowing look. Because I know you, Adeline. You're angry, and you have every right to be. But you also love your sister, or you wouldn't have spent a small fortune helping her have a baby. She was right, of course. Beneath the anger and hurt, I did love Lana. I was thrilled about becoming an aunt. I just wished I could be valued for who I was, not pitied for who I wasn't. My phone vibrated again on the counter. Another call from Lana. Avery glanced at it, then at me. Are you going to answer eventually? I shook my head. Not tonight. I can't. I need some time. Fair enough, Avery said. She raised her glass. To finally standing up for yourself, even if the timing was questionable. I clinked my glass against hers. To being the villain at a baby shower. We finished our wine, ordered takeout, and spent the evening strategizing how to handle the inevitable family fallout. By the time Avery left around midnight, I had a plan, or at least the outline of one. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 5 voicemails. I ignored them all, got dressed, and headed to the office. Work had always been my refuge, the place where my choices were valued rather than questioned. Today, I needed that more than ever. I buried myself in spreadsheets and conference calls, grateful for the distraction. It wasn't until my lunch break that I finally listened to the voicemails. The first was from my mother, her voice tight with controlled anger. Adeline, what you did was unforgivable. Call me immediately. The second was from Lana, tearful and confused. Addie, please, we need to talk. I don't understand why you kept this from me or why you chose to tell everyone like that. Please call me back. The third was also from Lana, her voice stronger this time. It's been hours, Adeline. I know you're upset, but this is ridiculous. You can't drop a bombshell like that and then disappear. The fourth was from my father, which was surprising since he rarely involved himself in family drama. Adeline, it's Dad. Your mother's upset. Lana's upset. Call someone, please. The fifth was the most unexpected. Serena, Lana's friend. Hi, Adeline. It's Serena. I know we're not close, but I wanted to check if you're okay. What happened yesterday was intense, and while the timing wasn't great, I understand why you snapped. Call me if you want to talk. Or don't. But I thought you should know that not everyone thinks you're the villain here. I saved Serena's message and deleted the rest. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I texted her. Thanks for the message. I'm okay, just needed some space. Her reply came almost immediately. Totally get it. For what it's worth, I've always thought the way your family talks to you is messed up. I stared at her text, surprised by the validation from an unexpected source. I typed back, thanks, that means a lot. Coffee sometime? She replied. I have opinions about your family's treatment of you that are probably best shared in person. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Sure. Later this week? We set a date for Thursday, and I felt a small flicker of something. Not quite hope, but perhaps the beginning of a shift, an ally I hadn't expected. The rest of the week passed in a blur of work and avoided calls. By Thursday, the messages had slowed, though Lana remained persistent. I still wasn't ready to talk to her, but I found myself looking forward to meeting Serena. We met at a small coffee shop downtown, away from anywhere my family might go. Serena was already there when I arrived, 2 cups on the table in front of her. I took a chance on a latte, she said, as I slid into the seat across from her. Lana always said you were a coffee snob. I smiled wryly. She's not wrong. An awkward silence fell between us. We weren't friends, after all. Our only connection was Lana. So, Serena finally said, that was quite a baby shower. I winced. Not my finest moment. I don't know, she mused. I thought it had a certain dramatic flair. Very Real Housewives. A surprised laugh escaped me. Not exactly the vibe I was going for. Serena's expression turned serious. Can I ask you something? Why did you do it? The money, I mean. If they treat you the way they do, why help Lana have a baby that would just give them more ammunition against you? It was the question I'd been asking myself all week. Because she's my sister, I said simply. And because I knew how much it meant to her. Serena nodded slowly. That's pretty amazing, actually. Especially considering. Considering what? Considering that I've sat through approximately 50 family gatherings where your mother and aunts have treated you like you have some kind of social disease because you're unmarried and childless by choice. I blinked, surprised by her bluntness. You noticed that? Everyone notices it, Adeline. It's not subtle. She took a sip of her coffee. What I don't understand is why Lana never shut it down. The question hit a nerve. That was the heart of my hurt. Not that my family judged me, but that my sister let them. She tries sometimes, I said, feeling the need to defend Lana despite everything. But she also, I don't know, part of her, believes it too, I think, that I'm somehow incomplete because I chose a different path. That's bullshit, Serena said flatly. I couldn't help but laugh. Well, yes, but it's deeply ingrained bullshit. Still bullshit, she insisted. And the fact that you spent a fortune helping her achieve her dream, while she let them use that dream to diminish yours? That's beyond bullshit. That's emotional betrayal. Her words landed like a punch to the gut, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. It was betrayal. Every time Lana had accepted their praise for her natural maternal instincts, while they denigrated my choices, she had betrayed me. I want to ask you something else, Serena continued. And maybe it's not my place, but what do you want to happen now? Best case scenario. I considered the question. What did I want? I want them to see me, I said finally. Really see me. Not as a failed woman or a cautionary tale, but as someone who made different choices and is happy with them. And if they can't do that? Another. Good question. Then I guess I need to decide if I can accept being seen as a failure, or if I need to create some distance. Serena nodded approvingly. That's healthy. Boundaries are good. She hesitated, then added, Lana loves you, you know. She's hurt and confused right now, but she does love you. I know, I sighed. I love her too. That's why this is so hard. For what it's worth, Serena said, I think you did the right thing. Maybe not in the right way or at the right time, but the truth needed to come out. We talked for another hour, moving from family dynamics to work to hobbies. By the time we parted, I felt like I'd made a new friend, something I hadn't expected when this whole mess began. That night, I finally listened to Lana's most recent voicemail. Addie, it's been 5 days. I'm not angry anymore, just worried. Please call me. We need to talk about this. I took a deep breath and dialed her number before I could change my mind. She answered on the first ring. Adeline? Hi, Lana, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Oh, thank God, she breathed. I was starting to think you'd fallen off the face of the earth. No, just taking some time. Are you okay? She asked, and I was surprised by the genuine concern in her voice. I'm getting there, I replied. How are you? How's the baby? We're fine, she said. But Addie, we need to talk about what happened. About the money. About what you said at the shower. I know, I cut her off. But not over the phone. Can we meet somewhere? Just us? She agreed immediately, and we arranged to meet the following evening at my apartment. As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. The conversation wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. The next day dragged endlessly. By the time Lana knocked on my door at 7, I'd cleaned my entire apartment twice and changed outfits 3 times. Ridiculous, since Lana had seen me in every state from blackout drunk in college to vomiting with food poisoning. I opened the door to find her standing there, her pregnant belly leading the way. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, making me wonder if she'd been sleeping at all. "Hi," she said, uncertainty in her voice. "Hi," I replied, stepping back to let her in. "Thanks for coming." Magnus immediately approached, rubbing against Lana's legs in greeting. At least someone was acting normal. "He's gotten fat," Lana observed, bending as much as her belly would allow to pet him. "He stress eats." "Gets it from me," I said with a weak attempt at humor. She smiled faintly, then straightened and looked around. "Your place looks nice. Different paint?" We were dancing around the elephant in the room, and we both knew it. "Lana," I began, "about the shower." "Why didn't you tell me?" she interrupted, the question bursting out of her as though she couldn't contain it any longer. "All this time, Addie. Why keep it a secret?" I gestured toward the couch. "Let's sit down." Once we were settled, Magnus immediately claiming Lana's lap, despite the limited space, I tried to find the right words. "I didn't tell you because I knew how much having a baby meant to you, and I didn't want you to feel indebted to me." "Bullshit," she said, shocking me with the uncharacteristic profanity. "We've borrowed money from each other before. This is different." I looked down, tracing the pattern on my couch with my finger. "You're right. It was more than that." "Then, what? Help me understand, Addie." I took a deep breath. "Do you remember Mom's reaction when I told her I was buying this apartment? What she said?" Lana frowned, thinking. "Something about it being a waste since you'd need to sell it when you got married and had kids?" She said, "Why invest in real estate when you should be investing in a family?" I quoted, as if anything I did was just a placeholder until I fulfilled my real purpose as a woman. Understanding began to dawn on Lana's face. "And you thought if you told me about the money, that it would just reinforce that narrative," I finished for her. "That my career success, my financial stability, the things I've worked for are just consolation prizes, means to an end, not valid choices in their own right." Lana was quiet for a long moment, absently stroking Magnus, who had started purring loudly. "I never thought of it that way," she finally said. "I know you didn't," I replied, and there was no accusation in my voice, just weariness. "But it's been my reality for years, Lana. Every family gathering, every holiday, every phone call with Mom, I'm constantly defending my choices, or worse, having to pretend they're not choices at all, but unfortunate circumstances." "I should have stood up for you more," she admitted, her eyes filling with tears. "I knew what they were saying was wrong, but I didn't want to rock the boat." "I know," I said softly. "And I understand. Mom's approval means everything. To you." "Not everything," she protested weakly. I gave her a knowing look. "Lana, you took up scrapbooking for 3 years because Mom once said she liked the thank you card you made." She laughed through her tears. "God, you're right. I didn't I?" For a moment, it felt like old times, 2 sisters laughing at the absurdities of their family. "I'm sorry," Lana said, turning serious again, "for not seeing how much their comments hurt you, for letting them continue, for sometimes thinking the same things myself." Her honesty was painful, but necessary. "Thank you for apologizing," I said. "That means a lot." "So what now?" she asked, her hand moving to her belly as the baby shifted. "Where do we go from here?" It was the question I'd been asking myself all week. "I don't know exactly," I admitted, "but I know I can't go back to the way things were. I can't keep smiling through the judgment and the pity." "That's fair," Lana said, surprising me with her immediate acceptance. "What do you need from me?" thought about it carefully. I need you to see me, Lana, really see me. Not as your barren older sister or as some cautionary tale of feminism gone too far, but as someone who's made different choices than you and is happy with them. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I do see you, Addie. I've always admired you, even when I didn't understand your choices. She wiped at her face. And I need you to know that I never saw you as funding my dream out of some pathetic spinster desperation. You're the strongest, most independent person I know. Her words touched something deep inside me. Thank you, I whispered. I'm going. To do better, she promised. I'll shut down Mom's comments, Aunt Patricia's judgment, all of it. No more letting it slide. That's all I can ask, I said, reaching for her hand. She squeezed mine tightly. And the money. Addie, it's so much. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, I said. Just let me be Aunt Addie on my own terms. No pressure. To find my own baby, know your next comments, no pity when I say I'm happy with my life as it is. Deal, she said immediately. And for what it's worth, I think you're going to be an amazing aunt. For the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. I know I am. I've already ordered a drum set for her 3rd birthday. Lana groaned. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I absolutely would, I laughed. Considerate interest on my investment. We spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about our lives, our choices, and our expectations for the future. By the time Lana left, something had shifted between us. Not fixed exactly, but healing had begun. The next hurdle would be harder, facing my mother and the rest of the family. But for now, I had made peace with my sister, and that was enough. For one day. The following Sunday, I found myself sitting in my car outside my parents' house, gripping the steering wheel with sweaty hands. Lana had arranged this meeting, assuring me she would be there for support. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into the lion's den. My phone pinged with a text from Avery. Remember your boundaries. Don't let them gaslight. You've got this. A second ping followed, this one from Serena. If all else fails, fake labor pains works every time. I smiled, grateful for these unexpected allies. Drawing a deep breath, I finally got out of the car and approached the house where I'd grown up. Before I could even knock, the door swung open to reveal Lana. Hey, she said with a nervous smile. Ready? As I'll ever be, I replied, stepping inside. The living room was exactly as I remembered it, down to the uncomfortable formal furniture that no one ever sat on except during Christmas and Easter. My parents were already seated, my father looking uncomfortable, and my mother sitting ramrod straight, her lips pressed into a thin line. Adeline, Mom said by way of greeting. I'm glad you decided to join us. Her tone suggested she was anything but glad. I nodded stiffly, taking a seat across from them with Lana beside me. Let me start by saying, Mom continued without preamble, that your behavior at the baby shower was completely unacceptable. You embarrassed yourself. You embarrassed the family, and most importantly, you ruined Lana's special day. So much for easing into things. I felt Lana tense beside me. Actually, Mom, Lana spoke up, I asked you not to start with accusations. Remember what we discussed? Mom looked momentarily taken aback by Lana's interruption. I'm simply stating facts, dear. No, you're stating your opinion, Lana countered, and we agreed to start by listening to Adeline. I glanced at my sister, surprised and touched by her immediate defense. Mom's expression tightened further, but she gestured towards me. Fine. Go ahead, Adeline. Now that I had the floor, I found myself struggling to find the right words. I'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in my head, but sitting here facing my parents, everything I'd planned to say seemed inadequate. I want to apologize, I began, which clearly surprised them. Not for what I said at the shower, but for how I said it. The timing was poor, and I regret causing a scene. Mom started to speak, but Dad placed a restraining hand on her arm. That said, I continued, I don't regret telling the truth. I've been funding Lana's fertility treatments anonymously because I love her and wanted to help her achieve something that meant the world to her. What I do regret is keeping it a secret for so long, which allowed certain misconceptions to flourish. Misconceptions? Mom repeated. What misconceptions? I met her gaze directly. The misconception that I'm somehow less fulfilled, less complete, or less of a woman because I've chosen not to have children. No one has ever said, "Some women just aren't meant to be mothers," I quoted. Don't worry, you'll experience this vicariously through your sister. A successful career is cold comfort when you come home to an empty house. I looked at her steadily. Should I continue? Mom had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. You're taking those comments out of context. I don't think I am, Mom, I said quietly. The context has always been clear. In this family, a woman's worth is measured by her children. And by that metric, I'm a failure. That's not true, Dad interjected, speaking for the first time. We're proud of your accomplishments, Adeline. Are you? I challenged. When's the last time anyone asked about my work, my recent promotion, the team I manage, the project that landed our company its biggest client to date? I shook my head. You're not proud of my accomplishments, Dad. You're disappointed that I haven't achieved what you consider the ultimate accomplishment, motherhood. This is ridiculous, Mom said, her voice rising. We've always supported your choices, Adeline. If you felt judged, perhaps that's your own insecurity talking. I felt a familiar surge of frustration. This was exactly why I'd avoided this conversation for so long. The invalidation, the gaslighting, the refusal to acknowledge their role in my hurt. Mom, Lana spoke up, her voice firm. You know that's not true. We've all heard the comments you and the aunts make about Adeline's life choices. The judgments, the backhanded compliments, the pity. It needs to stop. Mom looked at Lana as if she'd been betrayed. Lana, after everything we've done for you during this pregnancy. That's exactly the problem, I cut in. You see support as something conditional. You support Lana because she's making choices you approve of. You withhold that same support from me because my choices don't align with your vision of what a woman should want. What do you want from us, Adeline? Dad asked, looking genuinely confused. An apology for caring about your happiness? I want you to consider that maybe, just maybe, I know what makes me happy better than you do, I replied. I want you to stop treating my life as a temporary state, something I'm doing until I come to my senses and have children. I want you to be as interested in my career as you are in Lana's pregnancy. I want you to stop pitying me for choices I've made deliberately and joyfully. The room fell silent as my words hung in the air. My mother looked as though she was struggling to understand a foreign language, while my father seemed to be turning my words over in his mind. Is that how we've made you feel? He finally asked. Like your choices aren't valid? Yes, I said simply. For years. He nodded slowly, a thoughtful frown creasing his forehead. I never intended that. I'm sorry, Adeline. His apology, so unexpected, momentarily robbed me of speech. In all the scenarios I'd imagined, I hadn't anticipated genuine contrition, especially not from my father, who rarely expressed such things. Mom, on the other hand, wasn't ready to concede. This still doesn't excuse your behavior at the shower, she insisted. You humiliated us in front of everyone. The way you've humiliated me for years, I countered. The way you've reduced me to my reproductive choices in front of friends, family, and even strangers. The difference is, I did it once. You've been doing it my entire adult life. That's not the same thing at all, Mom huffed. It's exactly the same thing, Lana said, surprising me again with her firm support. And it needs to stop, Mom. I mean it. If you can't respect Adeline's choices and stop with the judgmental comments, then... She took a deep breath. Then you won't be as involved with your granddaughter as you hope to be. Mom gasped as if Lana had slapped her. You can't mean that. I do, Lana said, her hand finding mine. Adeline is going to be an important part of my daughter's life. I won't have you teaching my child that a woman's only value lies in her ability or willingness to reproduce. I squeezed Lana's hand, moved beyond words by her stance. This is how you repay me? Mom asked, her voice trembling with emotion. After everything I've done for you? This isn't about repayment, Lana replied calmly. It's about respect. For me, for my daughter, and for my sister, who, by the way, has done more to bring your grandchild into the world than anyone except Todd and me. Mom fell silent, her expression a mix of hurt and confusion. Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should take some time to process all this, he suggested. It's a lot to take in. It wasn't the complete acknowledgement or change of heart I'd hoped for, but it was something. A crack in the facade, a possibility of growth. That's fair, I agreed. I don't expect everything to change overnight. I just need to know that you're willing to try. Dad nodded. We are, he said, glancing at Mom, who gave a reluctant nod of her own. As Lana and I left the house an hour later, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, and might never be completely, but because I had finally spoken my truth and set boundaries that would protect me going forward. You were amazing in there, I told Lana as we stood beside our cars. I didn't expect you to take such a firm stand. She smiled, resting a hand on her rounded belly. I've been doing a lot of thinking since our talk, about the kind of mother I want to be, the kind of values I want to pass on. She met my eyes. I want my daughter to know that her value isn't tied to whether or not she follows a traditional path. And the best way to teach her that is to respect your choices now. I felt tears spring to my eyes. That means more than you know. Besides, she added with a grin, who else is going to show her that a woman can be successful and independent and travel the world on a whim? She needs her Aunt Addie to balance out all the boring domesticity she'll get from me. I laughed, pulling her into an awkward hug around her belly. I think you're selling yourself short. You're pretty badass yourself, you know. I'm learning, she said, hugging me back, from my big sister. The weeks that followed brought small changes. Mom still made occasional comments, but they were less frequent and quickly shut down by either Lana or, increasingly, my father. Aunt Patricia received a firm talking to from Lana that apparently left her speechless, a first in family history. And I found myself able to attend family functions without a sense of dread, knowing I had allies who would speak up if the conversation turned judgmental. But the biggest change came on a rainy Tuesday morning when Lana called at 4 a.m., her voice tight with controlled panic. "It's happening," she said. "My water broke." I was at the hospital within 20 minutes, beating even Todd, who was stuck in traffic on his way back from an overnight business trip. I held Lana's hand through the early contractions, breathed with her, wiped her forehead, and listened to her alternately curse Todd for doing this to her and beg me to call him every 30 seconds to check his progress. When Todd finally arrived, wild-eyed and disheveled, I stepped back to give them space, but Lana grabbed my wrist. "Stay," she said. "Please." And so I did. I stayed through 12 hours of labor, through Lana's exhaustion and tears, through the moment when she swore she couldn't do it anymore, through the final pushes when she found strength she didn't know she had. I stayed until a tiny, red-faced, squalling infant was placed on Lana's chest, and I watched my sister transform before my eyes into someone new. A mother, yes, but more than that. A woman who had endured incredible pain and emerged triumphant, powerful in a way that had nothing to do with anyone's expectations and everything to do with her own innate strength. "Do you want to hold her?" Lana asked once the baby had been cleaned and swaddled. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As Lana carefully transferred the tiny bundle into my arms, I looked down into a perfect, wrinkled face. Dark blue eyes blinked up at me, eyes that would likely change color in the coming weeks, but for now seemed to hold all the mysteries of the universe. "Hello, little one," I whispered. "I'm your Aunt Addie." The baby regarded me solemnly, her tiny brow furrowed as if she was assessing whether I was worthy of the title. "What's her name?" I asked, looking up at Lana and Todd. "You've been so secretive about it." They exchanged a glance, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Her name is Adeline," Lana said softly. "Adeline Grace Roberts, after the strongest, most generous woman we know." I stared at them in shock, tears immediately filling my eyes. "Are you serious?" Lana nodded, her own eyes wet. "We wanted her to have a name that would inspire her to be brave, to stand up for herself, to make her own choices without apology, just like her aunt." I looked back down at the baby, at little Adeline, unable to speak past the emotion clogging my throat. In that moment, something healed inside me that I hadn't even realized was broken. Not my choice to remain childless, that remained as firm and right for me as ever, but the sense that my choice somehow made me less valuable, less worthy of recognition or legacy. Here was my legacy, looking up at me with solemn blue eyes. Not a child of my body, but a child of my heart. A child who would grow up knowing that a woman's worth isn't measured by her reproductive choices, but by her character, her courage, her capacity for love. "Hello, Adeline," I whispered again, a tear dropping onto the soft blanket that swaddled her. "We're going to have quite the adventure together, you and I." As if she understood, her tiny hand escaped the blanket and wrapped around my finger with surprising strength. A promise. A beginning. 6 months later, I stood in my parents' backyard, watching as little Addie, as we'd taken to calling her to avoid confusion, kicked her chubby legs excitedly on a blanket spread under a tree. She was growing so fast, already trying to roll over, already developing a personality that was distinctly her own. "She has your stubbornness," Lana said, dropping down beside me on the blanket. 3 hours trying to get her to take a bottle. Yesterday. 3 hours, I laughed. Sounds like a Roberts woman to me. We know what we want. "Speaking of knowing what you want," Lana said casually, "Serena mentioned you two had lunch again yesterday." I gave her a suspicious look. "Are you two gossiping about me?" "Of course we are," she replied cheerfully. "It's what friends do. So, 3rd lunch in 2 weeks. Anything you want to share?" I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "We're just friends." "Mm-hmm," Lana hummed skeptically. "Friends who stare at each other like that?" "Like what?" I asked, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. "Like you've both just discovered a new continent," she teased. I rolled my eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. The truth was, Serena and I had been spending a lot of time together. What had started as solidarity in the aftermath of the baby shower drama had evolved into something else. Something I wasn't quite ready to name, but that made my heart race in a way it hadn't in years. "It's new," I admitted. "We're taking it slow." Lana's face lit up. "I knew it. Oh, Addie, I'm so happy for you." "Don't make a big deal out of it," I warned. "And don't tell Mom. The last thing I need is her planning a wedding and asking about Serena's fertility history." Lana mimed, zipping her lips, then immediately unzipped them. "She'd really like Serena, though. She's smart, successful, takes no crap." "Exactly like me," I pointed out. "And we know how Mom feels about those qualities." "Mom's changing," Lana said, more serious now. "Slowly, but she is. She hasn't made a single comment about your life choices in months." It was true. Since little Addie's birth, my mother had been making a visible effort to engage with me on my terms, asking about my work, celebrating my achievements without adding qualifiers about what I was missing. It wasn't perfect, and old habits occasionally slipped through, but it was progress. I've noticed, I acknowledged. I think becoming a grandmother has shifted her perspective. That, and the very real threat that I'd limit her access to Addie. If she continued disrespecting you, Lana said with a smirk. I laughed. That might have had something to do with it. Adeline, my mother's voice called from the patio. Could you come help me with something in the kitchen? I exchanged a glance with Lana, who shrugged. Go on, I'll watch the name thief. I found Mom. In the kitchen, arranging finger foods on a platter for the impromptu family gathering, we were having to celebrate Dad's birthday. She looked up as I entered, her expression uncharacteristically nervous. Need help with those? I asked, gesturing to the platter. Actually, she said, setting down the knife she was using, I wanted to give you something. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, holding it out to me. This was my mother's, she said, and her mother's before that. Confused, I took the box and opened it. Inside was a delicate gold pendant, a small, intricately designed tree with spreading branches. The tree of life, Mom explained. It's been passed down from mother to daughter for generations. I looked up, even more confused. But I'm not a mother in the traditional sense, she finished for me. I know, but you're Adeline's namesake, her godmother, and one of the reasons she exists at all. She took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened. And I realized that I've been clinging to a very narrow definition of what it means to nurture life. I stared at her, hardly believing what I was hearing. You nurture life every day, she continued, through your generosity, your strength, the way you've helped your sister, the teams you lead at work. You create and sustain life in your own way, Adeline, and that deserves to be honored. Tears welled in my eyes as I looked down at the pendant. Mom, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, she replied, her own eyes moist. Just know that I'm sorry for making you feel less than, for not seeing the full measure of who you are. She reached out and closed my fingers around the box. This is your birthright, just as much as it is Lana's. I stepped forward and hugged her. A real hug, not the stiff, formal embraces we'd exchanged in recent years. She hugged me back tightly, and for a moment we were just mother and daughter, no qualifiers needed. When we rejoined the others in the backyard, Lana immediately noticed the pendant, now hanging around my neck. Her eyes widened in recognition, then filled with tears of joy as she looked between Mom and me. She didn't say anything, just reached for my hand and squeezed it hard. Across the yard, Serena caught my eye and raised an eyebrow in question. I smiled, feeling something settle inside me, a piece I hadn't known I was missing. Later, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, I found myself alone with little Addie, who had fallen asleep on my chest. Her weight was warm and solid, her breath soft against my neck. I marveled at her perfect fingers, her impossible eyelashes, the way she completely trusted that she was safe in my arms. I loved this child with a fierceness that sometimes took my breath away. But that love didn't make me question my decision not to have children of my own. If anything, it confirmed it. I could be Aunt Addie, confidant, cheerleader, occasional partner in crime. I could love her completely without losing myself in the all-consuming role of mother. And that was perfect for both of us. Having second thoughts? Serena asked softly, sitting down beside me on the porch swing. I smiled, knowing exactly what she meant. Not at all. Just appreciating what is without, yearning for what isn't. She nodded, understanding without further explanation needed. It suits you, you know. What does? Contentment, she said simply. It looks good on you. I thought about that word, contentment. Yes, that was exactly it. Not the passive resignation that my family had often mistaken for regret, but an active, chosen peace with my life as it was. It feels good, I admitted. Better than I expected. Serena's hand found mine on the swing between us, her fingers intertwining with mine in a way that felt both new and somehow familiar, as though we'd been doing this for years. "You should try it more often," she suggested with a teasing smile. "Think I will," I replied, squeezing her hand. As the sun set behind the trees, casting a golden glow over the gathering, I looked around at the tableau before me, my family, imperfect and evolving, my niece, perfect in her uniqueness, Serena, a possibility I hadn't anticipated, and myself, finally seen and valued for who I was, not who I wasn't. It wasn't the life I'd planned as a little girl, dreaming of futures in my childhood bedroom. It was messier, more complicated, filled with unexpected turns and painful growth. But it was mine, chosen deliberately and lived authentically. And that, I realized as little Addie sighed contentedly in her sleep, was more than enough. It was everything.